All right, everybody. So we'll go ahead and get started with the artist talk discussion that we'll have. First, I want to just start by saying thank you all for being here this afternoon. I look forward to creating like a dialogue. I have a set of questions, but I do think that it will feel more like a conversation and hopefully more organic. I hope that there's also time at the end for Q&A, and that if you haven't had a chance to take a slow look at the work, please do that after the talk and speak with some of the artists that are here. So I'll start by introducing myself, and we'll then do like brief introductions and we'll dive right in, okay? And so I'm Kyle Hackett. I'm an artist and faculty here at AU. I work in the graduate program as well as undergrad program. And I've had the pleasure of working with the artists here on my left over this year with my colleague Tim Dowd as well. And so the work that you're looking at in this exhibition is actually from 6 artists as the graduating thesis class, the graduating MFA class. And I'll also have to say congrats on official graduation. So I want to acknowledge the fact that this is happening post-graduation too, which is really cool. And so, yeah, I'll stop there. So maybe we can do introductions and you can point to, maybe share where your work is at around the room.
Hi, my name is Lindsay Mueller. I'm, of course, one of the graduates that Kyle just mentioned. My work is right over here. It's the landscape-based sculptural paintings.
Good afternoon. My name is Philippe Jean-Pierre, and I have the installation and sculpture work. This piece right behind me, the work's in the middle. It was important for me to take up space, not just wall space, but feel the room. Opacity was really important for me in this body of work.
Hello, my name is Taylor Sizemore. I'm on the interior curve with very bright object, still life style paintings. Yeah.
So I'm thinking we can dive right in, and a quick like maybe promo as well, just about the show, is that there's a really excellent essay about the show written by curator and critic Marcus Simmons. And I think that there's a link on the website, but also like a QR code up on the wall, like the kind of wall with the collection of work as you exit, that you can scan that QR code and read a little more specifically about the artist's journey to this point. So I just wanted to kind of point that out. And I also want to say that like it's a very special moment to be talking to artists here in the moment, in the present, with the work around, right? Like this isn't like a PowerPoint or a digital presentation. This is kind of in the present space together. And I say that because like, you know, we can talk through things as well and maybe point out things like in the work so that maybe you can visit that after the kind of more formal discussion. You know, I think this question will start off, and it has a sense of maybe the scope of the exhibition related to the title. But I'm thinking about the connections between the source material and the material act of your creative process. And in some ways it feels like a conceptual underpinning for the work in the show. In the show as a whole, but I also think in each of your works as well. And you know, like whether it's like the presence of color, texture, or material, like surface structure. I wonder if each of y'all could speak about the relationship between your work and the title of this show, Surface Tension.
I can start. So yeah, as I said, my works are right over here, the landscape paintings. And I think for me, we kind of came to the title together, and we were thinking a lot about like the surface quality of the work and what's visible on the surface, but then also maybe what's embedded underneath. So the second half of the title is the visible and the hidden, and so, and I think we can all say that factors into our work, but I think for me specifically, I've been using plaster a lot to layer in like ephemeral information, shadows, these kind of natural patterns into the surface of the work. I'm trying to make it feel really dense with information and kind of lush, like similar to being outside in an environment, but maybe not in an overwhelmingly depicted painting way, but in a more experiential way. And so I think that that's how my work relates to the title, and then like there's the surface painting of what's depicted, what you can see. It's a landscape that was painted. But then there also is like these other components underneath that are interacting with that and affecting what is on the surface.
Testing, okay, real quick, before we kind of all talk about this too, I'm thinking like, this is like a way of introducing the work, but also maybe introduce this idea of like, how this happened, right? Like, the sense that this is the cohort's vision for the show and something that y'all put together based on things you saw in the work. So anyways, JP, I'll let you address that.
I was really thinking of opacity in the entendre. And so opacity is what you can see, being visible, but the entendre being multi-layered, having multiple meanings in the work. I wanted people to be able to access the work where they were consciously, and if they wanted to dig a little deeper, they could. So I felt like the hidden was like the hidden messages within the work. For example, this piece behind me is Le Marché Noir, which is the black market in French. So it's two different titles, the black market and Le Marché Noir. But when you think of black market, it's multi-layered. Like so many things that govern this world or dominate this world have been sold on the black market, including our bodies, figuratively and theoretically. And I wanted people to be able to access this work on multiple layers, on the visible layers and the hidden layers.
I think really that's something that we're all concerned with as visual artists. There is a visual component to the work that you're immediately drawn to or that you have access to. And there's all these thoughts and ideas that we're thinking about when making this work, that we're putting into the work underneath it. All of the research, the thoughts, the ideas, the experiences that really drive the work. And so the hidden and the visible of that, and seeing more of that the longer you spend with the work, either a painting or the sculptures. I think everyone's going to get something different out of it because we all live different lives. And especially in approaching my work, there's a lot of like cultural signifiers and innuendos that people can pick up on from where they are, and diving deeper into that and looking specifically at the way that the paint is handled in an area. I'm trying to point you to have the same thought or recognition that I do from my perspective of making the work. And so there's several layers of the hidden, the visible, what you want someone to see, what you may want someone to see a little bit later or to notice eventually, like the longer you look at something. And so thinking about ways of looking and understanding and thinking through ideas, whether that's the artist's ideas or your own ideas about the piece.
I'm wondering too, like, the sense of like the studio practice, like the process of discovery and the things that set up the work we see here. So many things that are curated are also like edited out, right? Like the maybe less visible but formative or pivotal kind of aspects in your studio. I'm wondering if like you could talk about some of the journey of the process, whether it's the fact of collecting objects, drawing, using photography, film, thinking about aspects in nature. What are some of the kind of things that inform the work that we don't actually quite see, right, or present, but rather they're probably embodied within the work, right? So in other words, like, you couldn't get here without kind of working through and sorting out, your process in the studio.
I'd love to start. I started as a photographer when I became an artist, so that's something I've carried with me through the entirety of my practice. And so I'm constantly making like visual diaries of my life, photographing everything, specific moments that mean something to me, the way that a flower overlays the hardtop, like just little visual diaries of moments in my life that connect to something else, and trying to like pull that through and show you like an autobiographical sense of who I am through objects and the objects that I collect and that have been given to me. So much of like our spaces and who we are, we try to describe ourselves through like spaces and objects, and creating a home that we feel comfortable in, or a space that we feel comfortable in with our things, and thinking about where those things come from and what they say about you as a whole, especially in like a consumer culture. Oh, if I buy this little thing, it says this about me, and there's a cuteness to it too, but really also thinking about the frames for my work. The frames came about in the last 3 weeks before the show came up, and having like the hard deadline of getting your ideas in order and making them come to fruition, all of them. Because you can make one painting and say, oh, there's a frame on it, but to really get into the full idea of it and to understand how you're thinking about it, trying to frame all of the work and make it specific to each painting of how it needs to be framed. And that was a big part for me of solidifying like some of my thoughts, and finishing the work was really the frame, and that is what helped it feel finished to me, and the whole process of making.
This journey for me getting to this point started, I'd say, about 16 years ago, studying fine art at Howard. Zoma was there. Thank you for coming out. And in that process, I had a painting practice, a collage practice. And fast 4 years later, I was hired as an adjunct here, lecturer at AU in 2016. And I saw individuals getting MFAs, and I was teaching, and I was yet to have it. And it was something on the back of my mind, but my father was sick. He had Parkinson's dementia, and I was teaching, practicing art, and going home to Dallas, trying to create memories with my father. And I was using art to create those memories. So I'd go like once a month back home and create art at the kitchen table. And so when he passed in 2022, I applied the same week to this program to finish, because I had the time. I had the time and the space. And so a lot of this work is about memory, preserving memories, and taking up space and taking up time. So over the past 8 years, I've collected items. With the majority of the items are found objects that I've reconstructed, even set ablaze, lit on fire, and there was a consuming factor to the work by firing it, and there was a release as well. So I would say my practice was based in memory and preservation, a reconstitution of sorts, but also a release. And that release was really important. Thank you guys for like allowing me to take that like with this artist talk. The MFA is done. I think my father will be proud. And I'm ready to go to the next step in the process over at Howard in the fall, teaching again. So, yeah.
I think for me, a lot of the things that, of course, the work is landscape-based, and a lot of it is coming from like local parks, like areas that are close to me that I go to often. So a big part of the process is, I mean, one, like going to spaces, like I run, I walk a lot, but also just I think like noticing things on my commute, things like that, and photographing things, but more so I think trying to remember what experiences of things are like, and like what emotions do I have, like what am I feeling like in those spaces. And I've been doing a lot of drawing in the last year to help digest these things and like ruminate on things slower. I use a lot of those when creating the work. So there's some drawings over there on that wall. If people have seen them, you have to make you all turn around. But so I think for me, those are some of the other things that get like baked into the work that maybe aren't as visible, like a drawing practice, photographing places that I've been, and I guess they kind of collecting those experiences of the natural world. Yeah.
It makes me like think about, and something we've talked about like I think all year and semester too, is the work operating and existing in like simultaneous spaces, whether it's like an object or image, and to what extent does the work we're looking at no longer become like a description of the thought, like it is the thought, right? And it's been really special to kind of see y'all develop an approach to a material act that I think also acknowledges the sensory. Hearing y'all kind of talk a little bit now makes me think about that as well. And I'm wondering, like, as far as like the visual language, do y'all see like overlap between like some of your own work and perhaps thinking about like this space, right? This like circular like museum space as a sensory experience, as a way in which not only the individual works unfold, but the exhibition unfolds. Like, are there aspects of like collaboration and overlapping features between not just like everybody up here, but the entire cohort that happened in this space to kind of actualize this show?
I can speak to that a little. I think some of that relates even in part to our title again, but like I think most of us, we like you were saying, like you like double, triple meanings, but I think there's that layer of like hidden meaning or like hiding little treats in the work, little things that you notice. I mean, that's definitely present in Marie's work, the wall over there, that you can literally peek over corners and see fun little things, but also in Neil's work, who's not here, he's like burying skeletons in the work. So, and even like JP, like thinking about when you peek into the little components of this work and also the work on our collective wall. So I feel like that's like a real through line. And I think like the idea is like a lot of us are definitely exploring either like memory or like emotional reaction. I feel like there's a lot of like care in the work. Like we're caring about something and we want to convey some level of care.
And I would also say there's a lot to do with like childhood memories and becoming who we are as adults and as artists. Marie talks about like tracing herself, and my work is very autobiographical, pulling specific moments and memories from childhood, adolescence, teenage years, currently, to say what's in this current moment. And Neil as well, he's burying childhood memories underneath the paint and thinking about some of the relationships from his childhood and loss and dealing with those things as a maker and as a person. And JP as well, thinking about loss and how you deal with those things through artwork and through your life and how you operate. I think as artists, we're just trying to be good people and have good lives, and that shows up in the work in different ways and how we're reconciling things, I think.
It's interesting too, kind of the collective wall. That's like the proper name for it. The wall over there with the QR code on it too. And the essay that I shared at the beginning too, one of the things that like I think really resonated with me in the program, and I think also like historically, is that MFA students in the program come from a wide range of backgrounds and like life experiences, right? So it's not like a typical, you know, kind of assumed mold of what a student is. And what that I think does is it kind of opens up space for new dialogue, like in the work, between the work, and also like showing the work. And I think sometimes that can be multidisciplinary, interdisciplinary. Like I know JP in your work, right? You're certainly thinking sonically about the work as well, and even the sense of like implied motion as well. And so, you know, the sense of like each group of students in a cohort kind of thinking about and noticing, being almost like a filter of their own life experiences and like putting that together in a show, I think really resonates here. And so JP, you talked about like moving the sculptures throughout the show. Can you maybe expand on that a little bit about like the placement and even like maybe the speed in which like the movement in the space is kind of considered?
Travel is it's an important part of my life and an important part of my practice. My parents immigrated here from Haiti. We had a pit stop in Canada and then back to Chicago. So I have roots in all three places. I moved around a lot throughout my youth. We didn't have much, but I didn't know that. Because I was privileged in some other ways, being able to speak multiple languages, being able to see prosperous family members, and things of that sort. But you asked about speed, and over this last 2 years, I've been to, just this program, I've been to Malawi, Morocco, Oaxaca, Mexico City, Colombia, Cartagena, St. Martin, creating work, and like in Dakar, most recently over the Christmas holiday, Dakar, Senegal, West Africa, creating works and finding ways to collect items from where I was and take up space again in these new areas. The summer of our first year, I went to Oaxaca, in the hills, the Red Hills of Oaxaca, and studied under a potter, an indigenous woman potter, who was working without a wheel. She had to walk a couple miles up into the mountains, get the red clay, come back down. And I'd see her work and build up this muscle. To answer your question, a lot of this work started in travel and collecting memories and trying to learn new ways of expressing myself. The fire came last. I'm really into James Baldwin, and you'll see some of the titles of the work called The Fire Next Time. That's heavy. I don't know if it's time to talk about the bars that...
Well, can you talk about, because I'm not sure if people know what torching means. So could you say that and like what that means to you as part of your practice?
It has multiple meanings. I had a conversation with Zoe this morning. I had artist and educator in my bio, and she said, JP, it's time to take that educator out. You're a scholar. And there's a lot of responsibility that comes with that, but you've earned it. And so there's a lot of scholarly work in my practice. We talked about Edouard Glissant already, right? The firing, you were asking about that. All right, so in being a scholar, the way the Americas were conquered was through fire. I don't know if you guys know that. So when the conquistadors came, or the planters came, whatever you want to call it, they set a blaze to the land, and then they brought people in to chop it down. But fire was the clearing out process. Fire also has like spiritual cleansing effects as well. So the firing in my practice is multi-layered. I've found a sense of meditation in firing. It's dangerous. And a lot of my work is dangerous, from the rusted metal cans, like someone can get tetanus from that. The bars there aren't welded together. It's fragile. They can fall apart at any moment. All of these pieces have a level of fragility to them, a level of kind of unprotectedness. I'll give one more story. The baby carriage that you see, that's black, it isn't fired. And I'm telling a story from birth to death. I don't know if you guys are familiar, but a man from this area, Baltimore, Maryland, a black man from Baltimore, Maryland, invented the baby carriage. So baby carriages from Chelsea, New York to Switzerland was invented by a black man. So taking care of our young, taking care of our babies, protecting and moving with them. Like the idea of, why would you invent a baby carriage? Why do you have to move with babies? Who took that care? I wanted to take that care with the work in a slow process. Base it in research and then make you physically see that there. So with the fire, and so from the beginning to the end, oftentimes, by the time we're retiring, by the time it's time to rest, we're burned out physically. And that's something that I want people to be aware of, but that's something that I literally don't want to happen to me personally. I don't want to burn out. I want to be able to enjoy this life. And there's so many things that are attempting to burn us out, whether it's bills or oppression or political indifferences. We're all getting burned out in one way or another. And I wanted people to visually see that.
Thanks for sharing that, because I think even, again, like time, right, exists in, I think each of your works here, like Taylor, like I know in your work even, we had conversations around the frame and how the frame can kind of crop or position the way in which something is viewed and hold somebody there, or release, right, the view as well into a frame. I'm wondering if maybe you could share a little bit about like the sense of time in your work, and maybe even like if that is connected to how you source inspiration or like source material or even light. And again, Taylor's work is the work around here.
I would say time-wise, speed plays a big factor in this work. It's oil paint on canvas. So I'm doing lots of layers of thin washes of oil paint, and so I have to let it dry completely in between each new layer. So I've become really processed in this work, and I've never worked this way before, because I was always very particular and detailed, and everything had to be completely filled in and to the level of detail that you would expect it to be, whereas I'm less worried about that. I'm not trying to prove as much that I'm a painter or that I can paint. It is more about the way that I'll say image or painting works. And so for speed, slowing that down and letting certain parts of the canvas be less important and have less layers or less definition, it lets you focus more on what has been described in detail or with attention. And thinking about the frames were slow and fast at the same time. I had to hurry to make them. But woodworking, you don't want to be in a hurry. So really slowing down that process, making the frames, building them, and then taking the time to paint them and handle them each differently. There are certain canvases that I wanted them really to extend and have the image crawling out of them to be breaking outside of the boundary of a box. Whereas some of them that are more square, that really do resemble boxes, they box the painting in. And there's another meta moment of framing it even further by being a book page or by being a magazine with something sitting on top of it. So I'm thinking about the way that all of these objects interact with each other in the space, but I'm also thinking about what they mean to me in the space, and I'm using a lot of objects to describe myself, like the body and who I am and experiences through objects. And so then some of them become more object-y when you do pull the entire painting around the frame. It feels like an entity, like its own object, its own piece. And so I think that's kind of interesting as well. I'm not sure where I'm going with that part of it yet, but I'm excited to figure it out further and to spend more time with the frames moving forward in my practice.
Do you have a relationship to time in your work that we see behind us?
Yeah, I think I've been thinking about that more actually even with work that I'm working on now since making this, but I've been thinking about different speeds of experience, and so if you're in a space, not everything maybe gets like an equal allocation of time or our attention. With a lot of the smaller works, there's like a fluorescent green in them, and I've been using that to kind of, well, I guess I imagine it as like a flash of green, like something that catches your peripheral vision or something that makes you go, oh wow, the lighting has changed. Whereas then there's moments that are really close to the viewer, close to the surface, that are detailed and slower and maybe handled with more care. And so I think I've been using different levels of depiction in detail and also through layering the plaster and stuff to try to suggest different like paces of experience within the work. Because I think since a lot of these are places that I go to frequently and see in different states, but then of course they're filtered through, these spaces don't look exactly like this, they're kind of filtered through like an emotional lens. I'm thinking about how time can kind of be like compacted in that way.
So, this is kind of like the last question I have for y'all, and for me, I actually think it's maybe one of the more exciting ones, because you think about the thesis and like the end of 2 years in graduate school is this like culminating thing, but yet it also is the beginning in many ways. And so I'm also thinking about the experience of like putting a show together and collaborating like with each other. This idea that sustaining a practice, has something to do with consistency, perseverance, and like working through questions and like working through uncertainty too. Were there moments in your studio process of working through uncertainty, or this idea of finding ways to ask more precise questions in your work that are leading to new exciting things next?
I guess I can say, I think something that was really interesting about this experience is that it has a hard deadline, and I've had works in other exhibitions and stuff, but usually those works were completed and then they ended up in the exhibition. I think that this is the first time one of the first times I made like a bigger body of work for a targeted date, for a specific goal of, for like the writing and stuff. And so I think that was part of the challenge, like just timing it all out. And I think when there was moments of question or uncertainty, being like, okay, well, I'm going to resolve this in some way. It has to get resolved in some way. And it's been really wonderful working with these two artists here, and the other artists in our group. I think we've all been really supportive of each other, which was really nice. And I know that that's rare at times. And so I think that that was just really helpful, having people that I felt like I could bounce ideas off of. So
I wholeheartedly agree that this has been such like a community-based program. We're all very supportive of each other, and we take the time to listen and really respect each other's ideas. So putting this show together and figuring out, specifically what the work needed, not like personal views of, well, I want to be here, I want to be there. It was really about the specificity of what the work needed, and everybody really listened and respected, and we figured out what the best pacing of things would be. And I think like putting a show together, as Lindsay said, the work is not all done when you're deciding where you want to be or things like that. So we also had to really like work in the moment of being flexible. And I was originally going to go between Neil and Lindsay, and we were all going to be on the same wall, and getting into the space, and you're like, oh no, this is, you really have to be able to be flexible and figure out what the work is telling you it needs. And I think too, colors like come together, and the pacing of the show is really nice. Like the JP's black objects interjecting between really bright acidic paintings, or over there, Marie and Lindsay with Marie's bricks leading into Lindsay's very nice drawings, and the pacing of that. So it really is just a group effort of figuring out what looks good together and what works well, and how ideas are functioning, and how that makes you read something differently based on what it's next to.
So I think we have like a few minutes for questions. If anybody has any questions for the artist.
Yeah, I can give you mine.
Hopefully it will come out clearly. I get a little nervous, but Charles's work made me think of it, but I think all of you all probably have something to respond to in this. But it's based on consumption, and consumption by fire. And your entendres not only have multiple layers, but they move in different directions, the positive and the negative. And so with the work being consumed by blackness, and blackness being a commodity consumed by the world, there still is a positive a consumption of nourishment, of consuming food, or consuming something for the spirit, right? And I'm studying hospitality at the moment, and the gift was the main kind of theme, exchanged, and it often came in by way of something edible or to be consumed by fire, symbolically consumed by the divine in communion. So I wonder if we're looking at your pedestals and the walls as altars of sorts, and your work as gifts, you know, in this kind of sacrificial exchange with us. What do you see as the nourishment that you would like for us as the audience in the world to get from the work?
Should I start? So I have a professional practice outside of being a student here at AU. So I feel like I was like market driven for the last 10, 15 years, and this program allowed me to slow down and make work that wasn't for consumption. That's why it looks so different than the other work that I've done or that I'm known for. It was important for me, it was liberating. If I could give you one word and not monopolize time, I would say liberating, because creating work about consumption and not being consumed was exactly the recipe that I needed to get me through these 2 years.
Other questions?
Do you want us to respond to it as well? Yeah, sorry, I was just thinking, what was I gonna say? I think like the nourishment, I think just like recognition of like complexity of space, especially natural space that we're in, like thinking about all of the layers of depth, and like, I'm really interested in like, I feel like when I'm in nature, like you can see so much, but there's also so much that I can't know, like things that change when I'm not there. Like it's probably, like most spaces, it's a space that I'm not in control of. And so things can shift, and you know, like there's kind of its own agency as far as what's happening. And so I think I'm hoping to convey, especially through the use of plaster and really building up the paintings, like this real like density of information and complexity that you can maybe allude to the mood, but you can't fully understand everything. And so hopefully hopefully the nourishment, I guess, would be like thoughtfulness or slowness that comes with that. But.
I would like to add on top of that about my work being thinking about consumer culture and thinking about being a woman, and thinking about the excitement and the plight of being a woman. There's a lot of joy, but there's a lot of fear in it as well. And the way that things are marketed towards women a lot of the time as consumable, or that you are an object, and there's Those are all things that I'm thinking about, and I don't know that I have an answer for them. My work, I feel like, brought up a lot more questions for me as a person, and as a maker, and having to stand behind, you know, what something means, and you're like, well, I'm not sure how I'm thinking about it yet. I think there's room for uncertainty and for people to feel like okay with being uncertain about things and trying to figure it out and being hopeful in that. And yeah.
Hi, oh gosh, Jesus. Excuse me. I guess this question might be a little bit too soon as it's in your thesis, but you know, I think one of the things that a lot of artists find is that the effect that their peers and the people they care about and the people that they've spent a lot of time with, the effect that it's ended up having on their work, sometimes in ways that you don't expect. And as you guys are about to go off and presumably, you know, go on to the next part of your lives, I'm wondering if either in your crits or in your, as you look at your thesis, so you're realizing that there's any ways in which you've affected each other that maybe you hadn't seen before.
Absolutely. I feel like we all touch each other's work in different ways. And I've learned a lot about painting in general, being surrounded by so many fantastic painters and makers and thinkers. My painting skills have gotten a lot better just by being around other people that have spent, like Neil is a chemist, and he's been working with oil paint for 20 years now. It's been a really long time, so he has a really strong knowledge of how different chemicals affect oil paint, and that's something I've picked up, and being more loose with the brush is something I've picked up from Lindsay, and being thoughtful and still being funny and thinking of double entendres and the way that words work is something I've gotten from JP and from Jeannie, and it's just such a collective experience. There's a lot that, and I want to work with everybody again. We have a group show coming up in October at Stable Gallery, where we're going to invite other artists to come in with us, but we're excited about continuing to be in each other's lives and careers, and hopefully keep critting every now and then with each other. And
crits were amazing. It was. I felt like the first day of school when you wanted to have your fresh outfit. I felt like every crit you had to come with it. Marie, Taylor, Lindsay, Jeannie, Neil, we all pushed each other. We were a small group, and I think timing is everything, and I think the higher power, not to get too religious, put me in the right place at the right time with the right people. So I'm really thankful for that.
Yeah, me as well. I imagine in like 5 years there will probably be more things that we notice. Another thing that I think we're all really interested in is like color and texture. I mean, that of course ties into the title as well, but like I think we all have different color sensibilities, but it's like, I think the color has like a lot of symbolic meaning for a lot of us in our work, so I don't know if that's something that we all just happen to have and then we all ended up together, but like I think that some of those things it's probably both, like things that we were interested in, and then because others of us were interested, it gets reinforced, and like that cycle continues, but I hope there's more things we notice in like 5 years.
I also think like even this cohort was distilled down. We started out as a much bigger group, and we kind of like boiled down to the good stuff, you know. And so hopefully this show is a reflection of the good stuff.
Well, thank you all. I'm really enjoying this discussion and learning about your work. Charles, the question, I want to start with you, but I would like for your fellow artists to respond if they like. I'm really interested in knowing more about the vessel that you created, or the question is, did you create it, or was it the work of a woman in Oaxaca? And so that's part A, and then I'm interested in knowing why you included it, and if your other two fellow artists see their works as a vessel, sort of a portal to a transformative of space and time. Well, you talked a lot about time, but I wondered if you see your work as the portal, and if so, where do you want to take the viewers? What type of experience would you like them to have through your work?
I have my handy artist statement to help you answer that question. Through the process of blackwashing or enveloping the words of blackness, I seek to question the active and historical dislocation of people, objects, and words. Each piece has its own conceptual identity that depicts the multi-layered complexities of blackness. No, I did not mold or sculpt the vase up there. It's very similar to the vase that she had down there, and I found it here in the US, and it was a homage to her. So I have been taking pottery classes as well. I think that's going to be, I took the opportunity to bring as much as I could. So even welding, I didn't weld the whole thing. I welded a small piece I can show you. But it was more so about me dabbling in and learning different ways to express myself. And this vessel was more about the form and the function of it, and also what it holds. This woman, I wish I had the name off the top of my head, but like 68, and she's really down. Like, I'm not that educated, or she didn't even speak Spanish that well. Like, she literally still spoke her indigenous language. And I was just like, looking at her in awe, and I think oftentimes we can't see our light. And I wanted to honor that and pay homage to that, but also practice what I preach and see the light within myself as well.
I could say regarding like the work as a vessel or a portal, I think I thought about like maybe more in the portal sense. I was thinking a lot about the edges of the work in the last year, and like, okay, like how does my painting exist in space, and then why is it on this like flat rectangle? And that's in part what informed them becoming more sculptural and like enveloping the space. That like I kind of want to be aware that there's the edges of this thing, that it's a fragment that's been now dislocated in a gallery space, but at the same time I'm hoping that, especially for the larger works, you feel as if you can step into them somewhat, or at least like feel the air of that space. So I think I am thinking of them in a atmospheric portal sense.
I would say I don't necessarily want my work to be a portal to somewhere else. I want you to have to sit with it. I want you to look at it. I want you to spend time with it. And I think that's the biggest thing for me. And there is connections between the pieces with the way that they're hung and the way they're installed. Thinking about how experiences or memories can trigger other memories, or how an experience can trigger a memory and where your mind goes, but trying to hold on to where you are currently. And it's indicated through some squares or some closeness and proximity through paintings. But yeah, just connections of time and space, and being in this place specifically, and reminding yourself to be in this place and sitting with it. And that's, yeah.
To add a little bit more to your question, the cart wasn't constructed, it was actually deconstructed to the form, to the place where you see. So there was a lot more elements, and I took the roof off, I took shelves off, I took parts off, and then added small installation items. So the baskets I didn't weave as well, but I took a weaving class in Mexico as well. So it's paying homage to the journey that took me to where I am.
Question to think about and all. And I would say Jeannie is very much thinking about portals and these transporting you to space or a different place. But yeah.
I'll just say thank you all for the questions and sharing this time with our artists as well.
Thank you so much.
I I encourage you to like, talk to the artists about their work, in front of the work, and do some slow looking together. So thanks again.
Yeah, I'm happy to stay here and explain.
Thank you all.